Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I'm Dan Scogan, your host for the Ag Innovation News Podcast. Guests on this podcast shed light on innovations in value-added agriculture. We highlight important voices and work that's being done throughout the Minnesota ag sector. And we try to educate the public about resources and organizations that support Minnesota agriculture. Today, we welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast Paul Kirkman, one of the founders of Victual Ice Cream in Crosby, Minnesota. Paul Kirkman, welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast.
Thank you very much. You guys get the honor of being my first podcast, so let's do it.
All right, sounds good. Paul, let's start with some introductions. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your business partner.
My business partner happens to be my personal partner as well. Actually spouses. My name is Paul Kirkman. My spouse is Paul Vanderwall. So we've got two Pauls in this business. The reality, though, is I'm the one that's involved in the day-to-day operations of the store. The other Paul is more a silent partner, helping out behind the scenes. He is involved primarily with IT, helping with website, our point of sale or POS system, and odds and ends of things as I need him. But this is really my gig.
How about the history of how you got into the ice cream business and how you landed in Crosby, Ironton?
My family has its entire existence made ice cream every time we get together for family celebrations. And this goes back to the 1950s with my brothers, and then I came along in the early 1960s. And so several times a year, my dad would pull out the old White Mountain hand crank ice cream cooler, and we'd set it up in the driveway, and we'd hand crank ice cream that my mom had cooked up on the stovetop. It was a very simple recipe, and I would probably consider it ice milk, knowing what I know today. And it was always vanilla, and it was always over the top delicious. And so as we jump forward many decades, every time we get together, we still pull out a White Mountain ice cream bucket, we haul it out to the driveway, and we make ice cream. Well, probably almost 16, 17 years ago, I started dating Paul, who is now my spouse. And wouldn't you know it, he's lactose intolerant. And so after a few times of making ice cream, he said, this is a great family tradition, but it does me no good. And so I set out to figure out how to do an ice cream that was lactose free using a full dairy recipe. I didn't want to switch over to almond milk or coconut milk or soy products. They don't give the flavor. They don't give the mouthfeel. They don't have the right melt. Nothing is right about those in my mind. And so I learned how to make lactose-free ice cream. We simply modified my mom's old recipe and carried on. And so for almost 20 years, I've been doing lactose-free ice cream at home. And as we started to figure out a business plan, which ultimately launched in Crosby, we decided that a house-made super premium ice cream was our main product. And we were going to use what I had learned about making regular dairy milk lactose-free. We're going to put that into use. And we created our own brand of lactose-free ice cream. And it's spectacular. It's wonderful. And of course, Ari was a big part of helping us get the product launched so that we could launch the store.
Paul, I want to come back to that at some point here in this podcast, but tell me then about the Victual Ice Cream shop itself. Whose idea was that, and what did you create up there?
Originally, Paul and I owned a commercial building in a nearby community of Cross Lake, and we wanted to figure out a business that we could install into that commercial space. So I set out to create a business plan. And as the plan was created, I realized that Cross Lake, unfortunately, was not the right community for the business. We needed something that had a little more focus on year-round activity rather than just seasonal. And we needed something that had higher traffic counts And, you can use MnDOT data to see quantities of vehicles that pass by any particular road at any particular point in time. And we searched a number of different communities before we landed in Crosby. We looked at Grand Rapids, we talked about Brainerd Baxter, we looked at Nisswa, and it became really, really clear that the community that we wanted to be and felt we needed to be was Crosby. They're in the midst of this most remarkable renaissance that is due to the mountain bike trail system that has been carved into the tailings of the old iron ore mines that closed up in the 1970s and 1980s. And it brings up literally hundreds of thousands of tourists to the community on an annual basis. And Crosby is a community that has figured out a way to rebuild itself from the inside out based on people that want to be here. So the community is not holding contests to give free rent to a new business for a year. These are just people that are pulling up their bootstraps and deciding that they're going to open in this community. And it's been a remarkable transformation. And we knew we wanted to be a part of it. So we bought 3 parcels of land contiguous. One contained an old shack that should have been torn down decades ago, but somehow was still standing. And then twin brick buildings. And we tore down the small shack and created this most magical side patio that has a side entrance to our building. And we opened in one part of the brick structure in 2019. And last year in 2023, we took over the other half of the building and more than doubled the footprint of our store. It's just been a really, really good decision.
Are you or your husband Rangers? Did you grow up in that area?
No, neither of us are. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and I moved to Minneapolis as a young adult in 1985. And my spouse was born in Brookings, South Dakota. And he ended up coming to Minneapolis about the same time frame that I did, but we did not meet until 2009. We had completely separate circles, and so we had kind of parallel lives, but never met each other until much later.
How have you acclimated yourselves to Crosby, Minnesota, and how have they responded to you?
We actually live much further north of town. We are about 35 miles north in a community in between Outing, Minnesota, and Reamer, Minnesota. And we're out in the middle of nowhere, literally. We live on a small lake, and it's such an ideal spot. And we kind of felt a little disconnected in terms of all of the things that we used to buy when we lived in the Twin Cities. And as we completed the business plan for Victual, we found that it included all of the things that we used to find at some of our favorite stores. So if I can shout out other stores from the Twin Cities that we have used as inspiration, we're a little bit Lunds and Byerly's, we're a little bit Surdyk's, we're a little bit South Lindale Liquors, we're a little bit France 44, we're a little bit Patina, just little bits and pieces of numerous stores. And they're all places that we used to shop at when we lived in the Twin Cities. And the truth is that every time we would travel south and go to the cities, we would put a cooler in the back of the car. And on our way back north, we would stop at 5, 6, 7 different stores and haul it all back north. And we started talking to all of our friends that had Twin Cities roots, and we discovered that they did the exact same thing. And so we slowly realized that there was a real big demand for a lot of the things that we sell in the store. And, there's a medical professional community up here associated with Pioneer Regional Medical Center, or CRMC. No one is focused on their needs. And, this is an area of lake home and typically individuals of higher net worth, and no one is really focused on appealing to their tastes. Plus, you have all of the tourists that come up for the mountain biking. And suddenly, besides making our own ice cream, there's a real way to connect to the community and bring in product lines that pop at different times of the year. We sell a ton of ice cream in the summertime, but we sell cheeses all throughout the year. And we sell a lot of gift items as we approach the holidays. And so we were able to string together a whole product mix that really brings in revenue all year round. And that's what we need to do in a community that, even though we say it's a 4-season community, summer season is still our biggest time of the year. In normal retail, the big season is the fall leading into Christmas, October, November, December. And for us, our big season is June, July, and August. And so we needed to put together a product mix that really drove revenue the rest of the times of the year.
Well, I'm going to come back and have you talk a little bit more about your menu and the different things that you offer up there at the Victual Ice Cream shop. But are you actually making, just so I'm tracking properly, are you making ice cream there, or are you working with a company that makes your ice cream?
We do all of our own ice cream. It is made on site. We have a farmstead dairy in Forest Lake, Minnesota by the name of Autumnwood Farm that produces our base mix. And it is shipped up to us in refrigerated courier. And we have a commercial kitchen that was a part of our original build out of the building. And we produce our own ice cream on site.
I'm going to come back to AURI's role in your product development and how that all worked. But I want to remind our listeners today that you're listening to the Ag Innovation News podcast presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. And we're having a great conversation today with Paul Kirkman. He's one of the founders of Victual Ice Cream Shop in Crosby, Minnesota. And we're getting a great story from you today, Paul. I know Crosby has really become a destination in Minnesota. People are coming to Crosby from all over, as you said, to get on the trails.
To get on the trails. And what we're also finding, interestingly, is that because of those trails, all of a sudden, people want to move to the area. And I think there's a lot of things that kind of have impacted Crosby's fortune over the past decade. Certainly, the mountain bike trails are a part of it. And during the pandemic, we had a lot of people that left the Twin Cities and came up to their quote unquote cabins and have relocated permanently. And we have a lot of families that are really focused on outdoor recreation and all of the opportunities that exist up here. And instead of people leaving town as soon as they graduate from high school or college, we have people that are moving to the area and bringing young families with them. And it's really exciting to see the transformation that's happened. I always say that small towns oftentimes don't get a second chance at life. And this is a community that is really going against the odds, and it's on fire. It's just fantastic.
More so since you opened, or had the fire already started when you showed up?
The fire had already started, but we hear from customers and we hear from civic leaders that Victual has had a significant part in the town's renaissance. Certainly, we took a big risk investment dollars to put into infrastructure that had been vacant for literally 40 years, a vacant building, and brought it back to life. And because of that investment, other businesses are now taking risks in rehabbing old abandoned buildings. And it's just one thing, one business after another, after another. Every year, there's 2 or 3 new businesses on Main Street. And so far, they all appear to be just hitting it out of the park.
We mentioned earlier that AURI was involved in some way in helping you to get started. What was their role, and what was it like to work with AURI?
AURI had a huge role in getting us launched. So I created a business plan for this business, but I had absolutely no experience at commercial production of ice cream. I'd only done it in my driveway on a White Mountain hand crank cooler. And when I first talked with AURI, the person that took the call was Jason Robinson. And in the introductory phone call with him, he indicated that he had previous work history with General Mills when they held Haagen-Dazs. And he was actually in the Haagen-Dazs division at General Mills. And so it was just serendipity that he was the one that took my incoming call, and I was paired up with him for our project. So he was instrumental in identifying equipment that I was going to need. He was instrumental at helping me find Autumnwood Dairy. They're the ones that are producing our ice cream based mix. He was instrumental in helping me figure out how to make lactose free ice cream out of regular dairy milk and do that in a bigger setting than what we were doing when we were making ice cream at home. Literally, in every step of the way, Ori was involved. Plus, they provided laboratory assistance to verify that indeed the ice cream that we're producing is lactose free. So, all of that came from Ori.
In some of my research getting ready for this conversation today, I saw reference to Rave Creamworks. What's their role in your business?
So, Rave Creamworks is the brand that we have developed for our ice cream. Victual is actually the name of our business, and Rave Creamworks is the brand of ice cream that we sell, that we make in the store. We purposely named it something different in case we ever wanted to spin off the ice cream as a standalone business.
The other thing I noticed when I was perusing through your website, I saw lots of words like premium, super premium, hybrid. It seems like the mission here is to try to be unique and spectacular.
I think you hit it. Early on, I think we used the term Northern Living Elevated or something to that effect. But we tend to focus on more artisanal products, whether that is artisan cheeses in a cut and wrap environment, or whether that is cured meats coming from small producers and not mass produced, whether it's artisan made gifts that are handmade rather than mass produced in China. And we also have a standalone off-sale liquor store where we sell specialty wine, spirits, and liqueurs. And they're literally things that are not available in this part of the state. They appeal to an aficionado for wines, and they appeal to craft cocktail aficionados. So not necessarily your everyday drinker, but we're targeting people that really like to experience something on a different level. We've taken that approach across the store, and we've really honed in on that customer, and I think we do it pretty well.
Well, I'm going to take you across the menu a little bit. Maybe you've answered some of these already to some degree, but I want to get a sentence or two from you on each one, starting, of course, with your ice cream, the star of the show here. Tell me about varieties and flavors.
Our dipping cabinet contains 24 slots. Approximately 12 of those slots are held by permanent flavors, and the other 12 are seasonal rotating flavors. Our recipe index box has about 60 different flavors that we make. Some of them are longer seasonal flavors, and some of them are here for just a short time and are gone. We want to fit them in the slot somehow, but they're not necessarily the best sellers, but they appeal to an audience and they create a buzz. So, for example, we have an ice cream called South of the Border, and it is made with lots of dark chocolate. It's got a little bit of mezcal in it as an ingredient. It has Carolina Reaper hot sauce, and it has chili powder, and it is a very spicy ice cream. The moment it lands on the tongue, you think you're eating a dark chocolate ice cream, and about 7 seconds later, you're on fire. And that flavor took a little while for its audience to catch on. Didn't sell a lot of it the first year. And then the second year, the people that had it the first year out started asking, when's that hot one coming back? And then the third year, it stays in the dipping cabinet a little bit longer because there's more demand for it. So we have several interesting flavors. Our number one seller, Oreo. It's made with an Oreo base. And then we have Oreo pieces that are inclusions that get mixed into the ice cream. I never thought it was going to be number one, but it leads by a wide margin. We have the best vanilla I've ever had. We call it Double Double Vanilla, because it has a double dose of both Tahitian vanillas and Madagascar bourbon vanillas. And we also throw in some vanilla specks. And it's so delicious. It's delicious on its own. We had customers that were making some rhubarb crumble. It's that time of year. So of course, they come in and get a pint or a quart of Double Double Vanilla to go. We've got several flavors that are flavored with liqueurs. We think it's an interesting flavor, and in small doses, everyone can eat it, including children and people that abstain from alcohol. If you think about it, vanilla is simply vanilla steeped in a vodka base. So when you're using a liqueur as a flavoring agent, you're not using really anything different than vanilla. But such beautiful flavors come out of it that I'm always interested in exploring that if I can.
What are you offering in cheeses?
We are a cut and wrap shop. What does that mean? We're not selling vacuum packed, pre portioned pieces that you self serve at a counter. Cut and wrap shop, we're bringing in full wheels of artisan cheeses. We have probably about 125 cheeses in stock at any given time. About half of our cheeses are domestic. The vast majority of those come from Wisconsin, and the remaining half are imported from all across Europe. And we have all cheese types. So you've got fresh cheeses, you've got soft ripened or bloomy rind, you have semi firm, through aged, hard cheeses, blues, just a remarkable variety.
I think I saw on your webpage charcuterie. What do you offer there?
Charcuterie. When we first opened, everyone wanted to know what charcuterie is. It's a fancy word that means cured meats. It's French. And people want to come in and put together a charcuterie board. And so we offer cured meats, a small format. You can buy a whole small salami, or we've just started slicing our own larger format salamis, or even prosciutto. So lots of different options.
I also saw a reference to gourmet. What's that all about?
Packaged gourmet. We try to find specialty grocery. So whether you're trying to create a fancy meal and finding it tough to get ingredients, or whether you're looking for a terrapin ridge dip that you can easily dip chips or bread or use as kind of a condiment on sandwiches or wraps, we've got all kinds of things. Our specialty ingredients ended up being a much bigger percentage of sales overall in the store than I ever would have guessed.
Do you offer some suggestions, some classes? How do I use this properly? What should I be pairing it with? Those kinds of things?
We don't offer classes. We've been requested on numerous occasions to do classes. We originally thought that that might be a business model that we might follow to draw interest to the store and bring in customers. And I don't want this to sound like I'm bragging, but the reality is that the customers found us before we ever needed to roll out classes or different gimmicks to bring people in. And quite frankly, at this point in time, especially in the summertime, we fly so fast, we can barely keep up as it is. So we're happy, all of the staff is happy to give recommendations and pairing suggestions. If you look at a tag that goes on a package of cheese that you buy, it is going to offer food pairing suggestions, and it's going to offer pairing suggestions for wines, beers, or spirits. So we try to provide as much information to the customer as possible. And Google and companies' websites are often our best friends. So even with customers, I'll say, let's Google that and we'll figure out how to use an obscure ingredient or how something gets used. If they come in asking for an ingredient we don't have, well, we can often find a suitable substitute just by using information available to us.
You touched on it earlier, Paul, but you mentioned that you have a selection of gifts. You want to add anything to that?
We try to find local producers, and not all of our things are made in the Twin Cities or in this part of the state, but we carry a number of what I would call maker-made gifts. And they could be home fragrance like room sprays or candles. For the kids, we have hand-crocheted mini critters. We have woodworkers in the area that produce the most gorgeous charcuterie boards and wire slicers for cheese. We have a blacksmith that forges cheese knives for us. Just all kinds of gifts suitable for gift giving in any event or any season.
And then, of course, finally, the wines, the beers, and the spirits, and I would guess some of the more unique stuff in this category as well.
Absolutely. I will make one correction. We don't have any beer in the store. Neither Paul nor I drink beer. And it's such a huge category that we didn't even know how to address it. So we addressed it by simply letting it go. But our wines are all from estate producers. So typically small, independent wine producers that are growing grapes on their own property and then producing wine in their own vineyards, not commingled with grapes from the region or purchased grapes that they bring in. You're actually tasting the terroir from where they are growing their own grapes. So elevation matters, which direction it faces, how far you are from the ocean. All of those things come into account for how successful a wine is. And for our spirits, we have a world-class selection of gins, things you've never seen before. I dig deep as I need to go because gin is my favorite spirit. There's such a variety of different flavor profiles that you can explore. And I'm also a fan of liqueur, originally used more or less medicinally, especially in Europe, either to stimulate an appetite or aid in digestion. So, what was once a medicinal kind of thing is now just an absolutely gorgeous component to a cocktail. So delicious. So, we focus on a lot of things that are really obscure, but boy, are they good.
Paul, we've got people listening to the podcast today that are thinking, I want to do what Paul and Paul are doing. So, what's the advice? If somebody's thinking about venturing off the deep end here, what should they know?
Know your market. I think that's the biggest thing. Create a business plan, have it vetted by financial analysts to verify that you've got enough cash flow to satisfy debt. And one thing that I did before starting Victual was I actually did a lot of research on the internet, number one, but I also interviewed small businesses that operated in seasonal resort communities. And I asked them, how do you extend the business in a seasonal community? How do you broaden those shoulder seasons to create a longer revenue stream throughout the year? And I came away with two things that I think were of utmost importance. Number one, produce your own product that your customers cannot buy elsewhere. So, in other words, my gourmet food products, if you were to scope out Lunds and Byerly's or Co-ops or Kowalski's, you would find a lot of the things that we sell. But the only place that you can find Rave Creamworks ice cream is behind the dipping cabinet at my store. So if you want my ice cream, you've got to come here to get it. And I think there's an awful lot of sense in creating something like that. The second thing that I learned was to create a business that follows a niche that isn't otherwise addressed in the marketplace. When I was doing my research, the thing that I kept on encountering was gluten-free, gluten-free, gluten-free. And at that point in time, grocery stores were starting to expand their lineup of gluten-free products. And I had no interest in that because it was no longer considered a niche. And Paul and I have a son and a daughter, and our daughter came to us and said, guess what? I'm lactose intolerant too. And so my spouse is lactose intolerant, our daughter is lactose intolerant, and suddenly it dawned on me that our niche was lactose intolerant. So we learned how to make the lactose-free ice cream, and we also focus on cheeses that are either by the natural effect of them being aged, the lactose naturally eliminates, or cheeses that are what I would call lactose friendly. In other words, cheeses made from goat's milk, sheep's milk, or even water buffalo milk. Those products still have lactose in them, but the sugar molecule can be digested by everyone. So we really capitalize on those products, and that's our niche.
So I have to ask, what's next? When you think about the future, you and Paul, where do you see this going?
We've got a couple of avenues of growth. We have talked about splitting off Rave Creamworks into a standalone entity and starting distribution to grocery stores and co-ops, but that's a high hurdle for us to figure out There's a lot of quirks in the business about being a small upstart, and everything in this world is geared towards big behemoths that have huge capacity. And so in a startup phase, there's some difficulties. And it's not only with the production, but it's also finding a source large enough to produce lactose-free base mix for us. So there's some hurdles that we can't figure out how to overcome, but it's still stuck in our mind. Secondly, there is the possibility that there will be another victual in another community. Whether or not it happens soon, I'm not sure, but we have been working towards a second store.
Before we leave you today, Paul, we should get a good place to get more information, a webpage, and then the address of the actual store in Crosby.
Our website is shopvictual.com, shopvictual.com. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Our handle is shopvictual, and our physical address is 124 West Main Street, and that's located in Crosby, Minnesota. And if you've been following along and wondering about the word victual, it is an archaic word that we purposely mispronounce. So you may be familiar with the word victual. It's an old English and French word that means supplies and provisions, food and provisions. And we worked with a branding agency that said because of the spelling and because of its different pronunciation, no one is going to correlate victual with victual, so we purposely mispronounce it.
Paul, this has been great for me to learn more about your business, how it became, and where it might be going. Just a great podcast for us today, and I want to thank you for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. And this was a great experience on my end as well. Thank you.
We've been visiting today with Paul Kirkman. He is one of the founders of Victual Ice Cream Shop in Crosby. I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for listening to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I want to thank my podcast crew of one, Lisa Martinez, AURI Communications Manager and Editor of this production. To learn more about the work that AURI is involved with, go to auri.org.